Good morning, everybody.
Hey guys.
Hey, Jill. Jill decided to help me out because this is the most uncomfortable thing ever for me just to sit here and talk to this camera. I don't understand how people do this for a living. It just boggles my mind, and I would say that this is so out of the routine, but now we've been, what, 8, 9, 10, 12, 14 months of doing it this way, so this should just be normal. This should be just automatic, and hey, we're going to shoot a video. It's so weird. Again, want to welcome everybody. If we've met you and you're one of our members or our frequent guests, we want to say, hey, we miss you guys, love you guys so much. If you're part of the audience that's just streaming this, whether it's through Facebook or YouTube or on a website, we want to say welcome and just, hey, nice to meet you. Yeah, that's not awkward at all, but I'm not the awkward pastor. I'm the very mature, very well-balanced, very stable.
Wise.
Wisdom. We are James' sermon series that we're in today. We're going to be focusing on wisdom. And oh my goodness, we use some wisdom in this world today. We have a massive amount of knowledge, misinformation, and a very, very big gap in our use of wisdom, which is the application of knowledge. The proper application of knowledge. That's Webster's or Merriam-Webster's or Wikipedia. Maybe
Probably
Wikipedia. Close enough. But just want to say, hey, welcome. This is Saturday evening at our house on the back patio, chilling with Jillian. Yeah, it's not really chilly. It's kind of humid, but again, I'll ramble, I'll chase rabbits, I will say a lot of stuff that has nothing to do with the video just because it makes me more comfortable on camera to do that. And I'll let Jill say some stuff and then just mess her up and interrupt her because that makes me feel more comfortable and more confident.
What am I supposed to say?
We don't rehearse these videos. This is something that we don't take time to write down, rehearse, or do any takes prior to. Just thankful it's not live.
Yeah.
Right? So, I want to say, I don't know, what do I want to say, Jill? Should I pray?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
I'm going to pray for us. We're going to get into this sermon. Enjoy some worship time with your family. Enjoy the word today. And again, guys, we miss you. We love you. Let me pray for us. I'm going to pray with a hat on. We're probably going to get some haters for that, but I love you guys anyway. Father, I just ask that you'd be with us today in this service. I ask that you'd be with your word and that you would make that word real in our hearts today, that you would fill in the gaps of our understanding, that you would give us wisdom. You say that you can be asked to grant wisdom and you would grant it without respect of persons, that's a prayer that is a good prayer to pray. And I do ask that you give us some wisdom in this world today and in the church, just to tackle everything that we're facing. I do ask that you be with each member and guest and everyone viewing this video today. Be with the sermon, be with Justin as he brings this message. Be with the worship time. God, may we worship you in the way that you deserve to be worshiped. We can never reach that here on earth, but let us get as close as we can today. It's in Christ's name I pray. Amen. Guys, we love you. We miss you. We're tired of shooting videos. Jill loves videos. She's going to do the next one by herself. Not going to happen. We did great. Love you guys. Peace out.
Bye, guys.
If you've seen even a single commercial or advertisement over the past couple of months, then you've probably heard statements something like, in these uncertain times, or during these troubled times, or now more than ever, something like that. I mean, these commercials, they go on from that point, and they talk about how we all need each other, or how we're all in this together, and because we all need to stand together, because of that, we should all go out and buy a new Buick or something like that. These commercials, they show us, if nothing else, that we are certainly in unprecedented times. Everybody seems to recognize that. And I think they also recognize that we're all pretty clueless about what we're doing right now as a society and as individuals, and in so many ways we just don't know what we're supposed to be doing. These really are uncertain times. But then you throw in what's been happening lately, and you look around our country in the past few days, in the past couple of weeks, and you see the questionable deaths of several people causing our nation this further sense of unrest, and even leading to rioting in several cities across our country. We really are in some trying and some uncertain times. We have no clue what's happening right now. People are wondering what to think about pretty much every news story that they see. They wonder, what do I make of this? What do we make of the riots? What do we make of these seemingly senseless and unnecessary deaths of people that are made in the image of God, just like anybody else? What do we make of the escalating tensions in race relations and the growing need for people to stand against racism and to stand against injustice? What do we do with all this? I mean, what do we think about it? What do we do now? Our times are uncertain. I mean, they may be some of the most uncertain times that we've ever faced. But that just strengthens our need for the topic of today's sermon. Today we're going to be discussing, as we continue in the book of James, we're going to be discussing the fact that in uncertain times, we need wisdom more than ever. I mean, right now, if you get on Facebook or you watch the news, you see what's happening around our country, you really start to wonder how you're supposed to think about these things. You wonder, what am I supposed to think about this topic? Or what am I supposed to think about that situation? And you don't want to swallow whatever the media is feeding you, but you also don't want to ignore what's happening around the country. And so you start to question, how should I feel about this? What should I think? And then as you start to answer that question, when you wonder how I should feel or what I should think about a situation, then that leads you to the logical next question, which is, what should I do about this? What do I do now? Now that I think this way and feel this way, what do I do now? When you ask the question, how do I feel about racism, or how should I feel about racism, then you logically get to the next question is, well, okay, what do I do about it now? What do I do? If I feel this way, what should I do now? You ask the question, how should I feel about these political statements made by this politician or that politician, or maybe it's some celebrity or something like that, and you ask, how should I feel about this? And then once you get there, you ask, now what? What do I do? How should I feel about the coronavirus? What should I do about it? These are the questions that we need answers to if we're going to be able to navigate the uncertain waters that we're facing today. But in order to answer these questions, you really need something that is the topic of today's passage. You need wisdom. Wisdom, biblically speaking, wisdom is doing the right thing with the information that you've been given. It's making the right choice at the right time for the right reasons. We all need that in our lives. We need wisdom in our lives. And as we continue into the letter of James, we're going to see that James kind of turns his attention to our need for wisdom in today's passage. After encouraging his readers to be like God, last week we talked about this in the last passage. He wanted us to be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. Then he moves on immediately to these words today. We're going to be in James chapter 1. Read with me. He says, at the end of verse 4, he wants us to be lacking in nothing. And then in verse 5, he says, if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given to him. But let him ask in faith with no doubting. For the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea that is driven and tossed by the wind. For that person must not suppose that he will receive anything from the Lord. He is a double-minded man, unstable in all his ways. James argues that wisdom is necessary in order to achieve the goal from the previous section. If you want to be perfect and complete, if you want godliness in your life, you want to be lacking in nothing, that means that you're going to need wisdom. So today what we're going to do is we're going to look at James's take on how to get wisdom in your life. He actually gives us a couple of statements about the path to wisdom. And James is basically saying, you want wisdom in your life? Well, here's what you need to do. Here's what you need to think. This is what needs to happen. And he starts out with a pretty clear kind of no-brainer statement. He He says, you want wisdom in your life? Then first thing you got to do is you have to recognize your need for wisdom. I mean, this seems like it's kind of assumed, right? I mean, if you want wisdom, then surely you recognize that you need it. But James starts with this need in our lives for a reason. Look at verse 5. He says, if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given him. James starts with the statement, if any of you lacks wisdom, I mean, this implies that there is a moment of self-searching somewhere along the path. There was this moment of self-searching that was necessary for his readers. He had just told them that their goal was to be lacking in nothing, and so this statement should have raised a big red flag for them in their minds. He told them, be lacking in nothing, but if you are lacking, you need to look and see, check your life out, and see if you're lacking in wisdom. It starts with recognizing your need. James very clearly believed that wisdom was important. I mean, he saw it as necessary to achieve godliness in the life of a believer. He saw that as a big deal. So he wanted his readers to take a few minutes and just perform a self-evaluation, as this self-examination, and just find out, do you need wisdom? Just look at your life and ask yourself that question. Do I need wisdom right now? James had quite a large amount of precedent that was set before him on how highly these godly men and women that went before him thought of wisdom. I mean, consider some of the passages in the Old Testament, and consider the premium that these Old Testament passages put on wisdom. Look at Proverbs chapter 2, verse 1. The author of Proverbs wrote, my son, if you receive my words and treasure up my commandments with you, making your ear attentive to wisdom and inclining your heart to understanding. Yes, if you call out for insight and raise your voice for understanding, if you seek it like silver and search for it as for hidden treasures, then you will understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God. Here Solomon's writing, if you want to seek after God, then start by seeking after wisdom. He goes on to write in chapter 3, verse 13, blessed is the one who finds wisdom, and the one who gets understanding. For the gain from her is better than gain from silver, and her profit is better than gold. She is more precious than jewels, and nothing you desire can compare with her. Still talking about wisdom here. He says, long life is in her right hand, and in her left hand are riches and honor. Her ways are ways of pleasantness, and all her paths are peace. She is a tree of life to those who lay hold of her. Those who hold her fast are called blessed. Clearly, there's a very high premium placed on wisdom in the Old Testament. And James kind of carries that over. He carries over this understanding into his passages, into his letter, when he encourages his readers to do this self-evaluation and see whether or not you need wisdom. Now, our passage actually encourages his readers to seek wisdom and by definition encourages us to do a similar evaluation. So think about it. I mean, just ask yourself the question, do I need wisdom right now? With all that I'm facing in this life, with all that's going on, with all of the craziness, with all the questions, with all of the insanity that's happening around us, do I need wisdom? I'm going to give you a spoiler. The answer is yes. Yes, you do need wisdom. We all need wisdom in our lives. Every single one of us needs to know the right thing to do at the right time for the right reasons. We do. We desperately need God's wisdom to lead us right now. So how do we get it? That kind of brings us to James' second suggestion. After recognizing that we need wisdom, after saying, yeah, I want wisdom, it starts with that recognition of our desperate need for wisdom, but you also have to understand that God is the source of true wisdom. Look back at verse 5. He says, if any of you lacks wisdom, where do you go? He says, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given to him. James told his readers, you want wisdom? Ask God for it. The fact is that God is the ultimate source of all wisdom. And that's a fact that had long been held as understood in Jewish thought. I mean, the Jewish people had long seen that as God is the source of wisdom. I mean, you saw that in the passages that we just read from Proverbs. But remember that those passages, they started out with words like, for the Lord gives wisdom, and from his mouth come knowledge, and from his mouth comes understanding. And they recognize very clearly that God is the source of true wisdom. And according to James, God is the one who gives wisdom whenever we ask of him. James just kind of carries this thought on, where they recognize that God is the source of true wisdom, and he says to his readers, you need to do that too. This section that James writes, it actually kind of echoes another teaching of Scripture that James would probably have been fairly familiar with. They were words of his older brother, Jesus. In Jesus' teaching on God's desire to give good gifts to his people, in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus said these words. Look in Matthew chapter 7, starting in verse 7. He said, ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and it will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives, and to the one who seeks, he finds. And the one who knocks, it will be opened. For which one of you, if his son asks him for bread, will give him a stone? Or if he asks for a fish, will give him a serpent? If you then, who are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father who is in heaven give good things to those who ask him? James knew that God gives to those who ask. He knew that because Jesus had said that. He understood Jesus' teaching that God's gifts were grounded in God's goodness, in his character. He knew that. And if an earthly father would give good gifts to his children, then how much more would a heavenly Father, who is the very definition of goodness? He's the one that we get our definition of good from. He gives good gifts. But God just doesn't, he doesn't just give gifts without any thought. I mean, he gives them freely, and he gives them without hesitation. I love how it's presented in this passage, that he gives these gifts without hesitation and without blame or without fault, or I guess more appropriately, the fault that we have in us does not deter God's giving us gifts. He gives it without reproach, this passage says. He doesn't scold us for our lack of wisdom. He doesn't say, oh, you should have come to me earlier. You should have asked this way earlier. Why are you just now asking for wisdom? He knows that we can never have it in us. He knows that we don't have the goodness that is required to follow him. And that's why he leads us to seek him. He does it not without, he doesn't do it so that he can blame us. He does it so that he can lead us beyond that condemnation to something better. He leads us to himself. God is the ultimate source of wisdom. And we have to recognize that need in our lives, our need for him. The fact that such wisdom can only be found in God. And James kind of leads us in that direction. He says you got to recognize that you need wisdom. And you also have to recognize that God is the only place to get wisdom. But he also has one final thought to share about acquiring wisdom. On this path to wisdom, he says we have to overcome doubt in our search for wisdom. Look back at verses 6 and following. He says, but let him ask in faith with no doubting. Talking about the one who asks about wisdom. Give me wisdom. He says, let him ask in faith with no doubting. For the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea that is driven and tossed by the wind. For that person must not suppose that he will receive anything from the Lord, for he is a double-minded man, unstable in all his ways. How do you get wisdom? Well, you have to ask. That's how you get wisdom. You ask. And this word that's translated, let him ask, is actually an imperative verb. It's a command. It's an active choice. You have to choose to seek wisdom, and we're commanded to do so. If you want wisdom, you have to ask God for it. I mean, look at what John Calvin wrote about this passage. He said, since we see that the Lord does not so require from us what is above our strength, meaning he doesn't ask us for things that we can't do. He says, but that he is ready to help us, provided that we ask. Let us therefore learn whatever he commands, and whenever he commands anything, to ask of him the power to perform it. In layman's terms, God's not going to ask you to do something that you can't do in his strength. So when he asks you to do something, logically, the first thing you should do is seek his strength to do so. Very simply, we don't have wisdom because we don't ask for wisdom. You're told to seek wisdom. God tells you that. you're supposed to seek it in him. This passage actually reminds me of a really powerful scene from C.S. Lewis's Chronicles of Narnia series. I'm a big fan of the Narnia series, and in The Magician's Nephew, which is actually the 6th book in the series, it's not the first, but you guys have heard my rant on that before, so I'm not going to really belabor that fact today. In the 6th book, The Magician's Nephew, there are these two characters named Polly and Diggory, and they're being carried by this newly winged flying horse. He just became a flying horse, and they're being carried toward the garden in the middle of this area that kind of holds the fruit that's needed for the protection of all of Narnia. And about halfway there, they decide to make camp for the night. And it's only when they look around and they see that the horse is chomping on his evening meal of grass that these two children realize, well, they don't have anything to eat. And then the two children kind of begin grumbling, and they begin bemoaning the fact that it was so inconsiderate of Aslan, the lion, to not send them with any food. And this is the discourse that concludes that section. Polly asks the question, wouldn't he know without being asked? But look at what the horse says. He says, I have no doubt that he would know, said the horse, still with his mouth full. But I have a sort of an idea that he likes to be asked. Without question, God knows that we need wisdom. Without question, he knows all the things that we need. But he wants us to seek it in him. He wants us to ask him for it. He wants us to ask him for the things that we need. And it's not just that he wants us to ask, but he wants us to ask in a very specific way. That way is in faith. I mean, look at verse 6. Let him ask in faith with no doubting. Then he goes on to talk about what that is like. It's like a person who doubts is like the one who's like a wave of the sea that is driven and tossed by the wind. This contrast that is made between a prayer of faith and one that is plagued by doubt is one that we've talked a lot about. I've told you before that doubt is not the opposite of faith. The opposite of faith is certainty. Yet here, James seems to kind of put them in opposition to each other. So why is that? Why does he hold faith in one hand and doubt in the other? And the answer is that because when the Bible talks about doubt, it's almost always talking about an act of choice that a person makes to, to place that doubt in something. You choose that you're going to doubt something. It's not this momentary feeling. It's not talking about the times that you have these momentary feelings of worry or momentary questions that come and they go from time to time. When James talks about doubt here, he's talking about what happens after those moments of feeling, those doubtful feelings. Those moments when a person actively chooses to lose their faith. They choose that they're not going to believe in something. They choose that they're not going to trust someone. That is the doubt. It's an active choice. It's not just those moments where what we often talk about doubt when we say, "Oh, I doubt that chair's going to hold me," or "I doubt that I'm going to have enough money for this trip that I want to take," or "I doubt this," or "I doubt that." We often talk about these momentary thoughts that we have, but doubt is a choice in the Bible. And it's a lot like what we were talking about earlier. You kind of wonder what you're supposed to feel about something, and then afterward, based off of what you chose there, that's when you wonder what you're supposed to do about it. The natural outcome of the first question is what leads to the second question, and that's what we're talking about when we say doubt here. James is talking about how we choose to follow what we feel. You've probably, if I were just guessing, you've probably had some moments of serious doubts in your life. You've probably had these doubts that are weighing on you, even maybe heavily right now. But I want to encourage you. I want to say to you that this passage is not talking about the momentary feelings that come up from time to time. Those are the feelings that need to be squelched on a regular basis, and you just say, you know what? No, that's the devil. I'm not listening to that, and then you choose to believe something else. What this passage is talking about is what you do with your feelings once you recognize them. The word that's used here for doubt literally means to differentiate or to dispute between two things. When it's used as it is here, it signifies this dispute inside oneself. It's often translated as a wavering, which is why it's related to the waves of the sea here, because the internal dispute it implies makes you kind of flounder around and go back and forth between two different things. James is pointing out this strong sense of doubt that continually divides a believer and brings that person this constant sense of wavering and inconsistency in their attitude or in the actions that come out of that attitude. Momentary doubts that can be ignored and overcome are not in mind here. What's in mind here is something so much more serious. Look at how James describes this person that lacks faith. He says he's like a wave of the sea that is driven and tossed by the wind. That's in verse 6. He says that person must not suppose that he will receive anything from the Lord because he's double-minded and unstable in all his ways. This is where James really starts to use word pictures. And I love this because James is, as you read through this letter that he wrote, he's like the king of metaphors. He's going to use them all over the place where he says that so-and-so is like this and this is like that. And he uses them all throughout his letter. And here he says that the person who doubts is like a wave of the sea that is driven and tossed by the wind. This is not talking about just like the waves that gently lap onto the shore, but rather like a boat that is out in the middle of a swelling sea. And it never has the same texture. The sea, it's just constantly changing shape and constantly moving from one moment to the next. And it's always changing with the winds. That's the picture that James is using here. And basically what he's saying is the person who doubts is wishy-washy. He's always changing. She's always different. She's always being vacillating between two things or multiple things. This person, he is the epitome of wishy-washiness. And to cement this truth, James even kind of invents a word here that we don't know if it was used beforehand, but we know that James uses this word. He says that he is a double-minded man. The word in the original language actually means double-souled. You've got two different beings inside of you. It's like you have two souls that are fighting to get their way out and trying to gain dominance inside of you. To have this kind of doubt, a person can't decide between their allegiances. And one day they might decide that they're going to incline this way, the other day they're going to incline that way, but they never commit. And then the next day it's something different. It's totally different because every single day changes. They still won't commit to one way or another. And it's this lack of commitment that becomes the constant source of agitation in that person's life. It keeps them from ever making any real progress towards any serious goal, including wisdom. They never really get the wisdom that they need because they're constantly going back and forth between the decisions that they need to make. Sound familiar? Have you ever felt that way? You ever felt torn? You ever feel like you're fighting with yourself? Like you have these two different things, these different desires, and you can't really decide between the two? You ever read an article or watched a news report that you just can't decide exactly how you're supposed to feel about it? You're just not really sure what you're supposed to do afterwards? Or maybe you had a conversation with a loved one and you leave thinking that you really don't know what you're supposed to think or feel or do afterward. That feeling is double-mindedness. That's this idea that James is talking about. But before you beat yourself up about it, don't. Because there's actually a really simple solution to double-mindedness. He says, just seek God and His wisdom. That's what you're supposed to do. Seek God. That's the solution. Because if you lack wisdom, then ask God who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given him. That's your solution. And it's amazing. What's most amazing about it to me is that God is not just the source of our solution to the problem. He doesn't give us the stuff that we need and say, all right, well, I'm done, good luck with it. He actually gives us himself. I mean, look at how Luke presents the very same teaching that I read to you earlier from Matthew. So after talking about how everyone who seeks finds because they knock, and after that passage, Jesus says that the Father in heaven knows how to give good gifts. And look at how Luke presents it. In Luke chapter 11, verse 13, he says, "If you then, who are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will the Heavenly Father give the Holy Spirit to those who ask Him?" Did you catch it? Did you see it? You seek good gifts in your life, and what God gives you is Himself. He gives you the best gift. You seek wisdom, He gives you the God of wisdom. You seek peace in your life, He gives you the Prince of Peace. If you seek clarity, he gives you the one who is the light of the world. He gives you himself. That's what you need. And we think, well, I need wisdom in my life, so I'm going to seek God so that I can get wisdom. That's the wrong attitude. That's the wrong conclusion. You don't seek God so that you can get something else in return. You seek God so that he will give you himself. And you get everything else in return. Everything. You have no need beyond him. So, do you want wisdom in your life? The answer is really simple. Seek God. He will give you himself. He'll give you wisdom because he's going to give you the God of wisdom. You will know what you're supposed to do then. If you're worried about not knowing how to feel about racism right now, seek God and he will give you himself. If you're worried and you don't know how to feel about injustice, seek the God of justice and he will give you himself. And you'll know how you're supposed to feel and you'll know what you're supposed to do. You'll know how to answer. Whenever you ask the question, what am I supposed to feel about this? You'll know. Whenever you get beyond that question to the question of, now what do I do about it? You will know, because you will know the God who is the answer to those questions. And so when you see this unrest about us all around our nation, you know it all comes down to the wisdom that comes from knowing God. That's how you know what to do and what to feel and how to be, because it all comes down to wisdom. And that wisdom comes from God. So whenever you're facing a difficulty this week, whenever you're facing a question where you're feeling inside of you this double-mindedness and you don't know what way to feel or to act, I want to encourage you, start by asking God what he thinks. Start by asking God what he wants you to think. Ask him, seek him, go after him, and you will find him. That's the promise that we have in the Bible. Is that when you seek me and you seek me with all of your heart, you will find me. He promises to be found by you. So if you need wisdom this week, seek God. If you need peace, seek God. You need some type of direction, seek God. And he promises to be found by you. Well, after reading all the surveys that many of you guys filled out, I can honestly say that I wasn't terribly shocked by most of your answers. Wait, I take that back. I was shocked by one of your answers. One of your answers in particular shocked me that I don't know if this is an indication of our mental state right now in the lockdown that we've been in or what it is, but I was completely shocked by the fact that some 65% of you said that Rick and Kendall's announcements were actually entertaining. And only 3 people checked that we actually need new pastors. What is wrong with you people? I don't understand you. I spent like one announcement video with them a couple of weeks ago or last week, and I was ready to kill them. It takes them like 15 minutes to say 2 minutes worth of announcements. And yet here you are encouraging them through your answers on the survey. This is my disappointed face. The truth is, I really do appreciate you guys, and we appreciate you guys filling out those surveys. But today, we have like 10 minutes worth of announcements, and we need to cram it into a short amount of time. So I kicked the guys out. I just said, yeah, I'll take care of this one. It's good. Because who knows how long it would have taken with Interrupter and Interrupter B over here. So today I thought I'd handle it and just kind of do it without the interruptions, see how things would go. Because there's a lot to be said in a small amount of time. So here goes. We have one major announcement for today. And it's this. Drum roll. We have finalized our regathering plan. It's done. We are done with it. We've been meeting and praying, and it's done. Technically, I guess it's still tentative, but I mean, it's as set in stone as any plan can be right now. So here goes. I know that many of you guys were hoping for us to be able to get together today on this Sunday for an in-person gathering outside on the lawn. Ultimately, your leadership decided to hold off on that for several reasons, but the biggest reason was that we finally set a date to shoot for us getting back to our semi-normal weekly in-person gatherings again. And we're so stinking excited about it. We thought you guys would be better served for us to kind of put our time into and our energy into making that first week back and the subsequent weeks back as good as they possibly can be. So we decided to just hold off on this one-time meeting in lieu of getting back into our weekly gatherings with our best foot forward. And with that being said, I want to kind of give you a preface before I tell you the date. I want to give you a preface or two before giving you the official plan. First is this. I know that we have a lot of people in our group with a lot of different opinions about how quickly we should or should not get back together. The surveys, if nothing else, they showed us that. Typically in a church of 50 or 60 people, you're going to have exactly 50 or 60 different opinions about pretty much every given scenario. That's just a scientific fact. We get that. I know that everybody has different opinions and they all come with different suppositions and preconceived ideas, and we get that. But understanding that, I'm going to ask a favor of you. I'm asking this of every single person that is watching this video. I want to ask you to show some grace. I want you to show grace to anyone who might disagree with your particular opinion of what is best. I get that your opinion is the best, but the other people might not know that. So I'm going to ask you to show a little bit of grace as you interact with this plan. You might think that it's just a simple decision one way or another. I get that. But I assure you, it's not simple. It's not simple one way or another. This was a very complex decision with so many different factors that went into it that I can honestly say that I've never in my 20 years of ministry had to consider so many different unprecedented considerations when making a complex decision like this. It wasn't easy. We've been dealing with this for a while and really going back and forth on it. And your leadership guys have been working hard to figure out exactly what we feel is best for the church moving forward. So give your pastor some grace and give your fellow brothers and sisters in the church as much grace as you possibly can. If somebody happens to disagree with your wise and unimpeachable opinion, just give them the grace to let them have their own wise and unimpeachable opinion. We're all doing the best that we can with what we've been given. I mean, every one of us is just doing the best with whatever hand has been dealt to us here. So remember to show the grace of Christ in how you receive this plan. It's been prayed over, it's been discussed, it's been prayed over again, it's been discussed again, and did I mention that we've been praying about it? I think we have. And believe me that we believe that this is what is best for the church. So here goes. Our plan, and I guess I should say tentative plan because everything is completely subject to change. I mean, if there's ever been a time when we have to be ready to pivot, this is it. But our plan, as it stands, is this. Our plan is to start weekly in-person gatherings back the first week of July. That means that on Sunday, July the 5th, right here in this room, ta-da! Right here, we're going to meet together again after months of separation, and it is going to be so good. Now, July 5th might have pricked up some hairs on the back of your neck or caused some red flags to fly. You might be thinking, why are we waiting until July? That may seem like way too long for you. I guess there are some people that might be like, why are you doing it so soon? Depending on where you fall on this. But here's our reasoning for setting the date at July the 5th. When we do finally start meeting together in person again, we have a major priority, one major priority. I mean, other than health. Obviously, health is a priority for us. But talking about meeting the needs of our people, we have one major priority that we really want to make sure that we cover before we can start back our weekly in-person gatherings. We want to make sure that we don't intentionally or unintentionally isolate anybody. Here's what I mean by that. Some of you guys are chomping at the bit. You're just ready to meet back together again. I get that, and I'm definitely with you on that. I want to see everybody. We want, as a church, though, we want to make sure that we're able to offer you the best opportunity for you to worship God on a weekly basis through in-person gatherings that we can possibly offer you. We want it to be safe, and we want it to be sanitized, and we want it to be clean, and we want it to be the best experience that you can possibly have. We want to make sure that our buildings are cleaned and sanitized and ready for whoever shows up. We want to make sure that we have available everything we need in order to offer the cleanest possible experience while you're here. We want to be able to offer hand sanitizer stations and have the cleaners that are necessary to disinfect all the high-touch surfaces that we're going to be going through as we meet. We want all that to be ready and in the best possible shape. So all that's going to take some time to prepare. So what we thought was the month of June would give us enough time to actually get all that stuff ready. We've got to order some stuff, and a lot of it's on back order. We've got a lot of cleaning supplies that we need to get, and they're not easy to get right now. So we have to use this month to get everything ready so that you can have the best possible in-person gathering experience that we can offer you right now. And I want that, but on the flip side, so you got the people that are ready to get back into the swing of things. We don't want to isolate you by offering something that's not safe or clean or something like that. But on the other side, there are others who are not going to be ready to get back into the swing of things. They're not yet ready to jump back into weekly in-person gatherings, and we don't want to isolate them either. We don't want to have problems with either group. And see, we're just as committed to making sure that you guys, if you're one of those that falls into the hesitant group, that you're able to worship God on a weekly basis through some online streaming option that is the best that we can possibly offer you during this time. We don't want those that choose to stay home for a while to feel somehow less important or less worthy than those who are showing up in person. We don't want to just abandon our online efforts because we're meeting in person again, and now if you don't show up, then I guess that's your decision. So what we decided was that we need to prepare ourselves in order to start streaming a decent quality weekly gathering on a weekly basis for anybody who chooses not to come on any particular day. We realize that there are also going to be some parents out there who are going to be in a very difficult position during this time, because we're not going to be able to have preschool or children's ministry programs for a while. We don't know what that's going to look like. We don't know when we'll be able to get back into that, but we know initially those aren't going to be available. And that means that some parents are going to choose to stay home with their kids instead of coming up to the church. Or maybe they'll choose to send one parent to the church and one to stay home with the kids that need the more supervision. We get that. You don't want to come to the church building just to chase your kids around and be miserable for an hour. So we want you to have the option to join us digitally each week through some live stream of our entire worship gathering. And in order to prepare that for anyone who chooses to stay home, again, it's going to take some time. Don't worry, though. We've got our best man on it, Kendall. Kendall's actually working really hard right now. He's ordering the extra equipment that we need, and he's making sure that we're going to have a decent live stream that's going to happen every single week. So all that to say, everything that we just discussed is going to take some time. I would love to jump right in and say, all right, well, the first week of June, we're back together and everything's good to go and everything's back to normal, but it can't be. I mean, our building is not in the shape to receive people as it is. So we thought it would be best to take a month, the month of June, to make sure that we have all of our ducks in a row so that we can regather in the strongest and safest way possible. And to be honest, I guess there's one other reason that we feel good about waiting until the July start date. That gives us the full month of June to see how things go now that the state has been reopened for business for a while. We can actually wait and see if there's going to be a resurgence of this virus, or if the summer is going to help us out and it's going to taper off like it often does with the flu. This month, the month of June, gives us the best information possible, and it gives us an adequate amount of time to prepare ourselves so that we don't isolate anybody. So there you have it, July 5th, right here in this room. We're going to be setting up a lot of social distancing protocols between now and then. We're going to be making you very well aware of it as the time approaches. But I'm not going to go into all that now, but just now let me give you that assurance that we're doing everything we can over the course of this month to make sure that July 5th and following is the best that it can possibly be. And until then, we'll keep doing our online videos as we have had them, and you'll be able to continue to worship as your family there at your house. So until July 5th, let me give you a couple of dates that you need to keep in mind. Saturday, June the 13th, you can write that down. We're actually going to have a church work day right here on the church campus. For anybody that wants to come, this is going to be more of a renovation day. So we have a whole lot to do to prepare and to help us to get ready. So we're going to be using this day to do everything except clean, all right? We're not going to be doing all the disinfecting and cleaning on that day. That's actually going to happen 2 weeks later, which brings me to the second date that you need to remember. So June the 13th is the church work day. June the 27th, that's also a Saturday, is going to be our cleaning day. We're going to get up here and we're going to disinfect everything. So if you want to come to either of those days from 8:30 until about lunchtime or maybe a little bit afterward, we're going to be here working, and we'd love to have anybody up here who's willing to come. I would ask you to maintain the proper social distancing protocols when you do. Don't get in people's faces. Wear a mask if you feel the need, and I want you guys to just get used to that. We're not going to be shaking hands and hugging necks and doing any of that stuff for a while. So just get used to it. But we'd love to have you here on either one of those days. If you can come to one or both of them, we can definitely use your help. And if you happen to have purchased any of the cleaning supplies that we asked you about, these days would be a great time to drop them off at the church. You can bring them with you when you come, and we'll do our best to get the facility into the absolute best shape possible before our regathering service happens on July the 5th. And we've got so much to celebrate that day, guys. It's been difficult, but it's been good. God has been so good to our church and to us and to our church family over the course of these last several months. And I want you to remember that. And when we get together on the 5th, it is going to be a sweet, sweet time of celebration. And until then, remember, our small groups are already gathering in person again. If you aren't currently a part of one of those, then feel free to contact me or Rick or Kendall, and we can get you information to get into one of those. And otherwise, we'll look forward to seeing you guys on July the 5th when we celebrate all that God has done as we've been scattered, and we celebrate as we regather together in person. We love you, and we'll see you again soon.